Romance is a basically required part of every story. Boring plot? Add a romance. Flat characters? Add some romantic tension to elicit some sort of emotion from your audience. Romance is the solution to basically all story-based problems, and that's why today I'm going to be showing you how to write one of the love interests of all time. The first thing to note about a love interest is that they are only important and therefore only a person in relation to the protagonist, as is true of all side characters. And so today's protagonist is going to be Self, or Selfia, you'll understand why shortly, in Sergio. The great thing about this protagonist is that he is literally me, or literally you, or literally whoever is reading my novel. Don't need to bother with characterization if they're literally just you, with no effort at disguising that whatsoever. Maybe we should just write this in second person at this point. But anyway, Self, Ia, and Sergio would not be complete without their love interest, Female the Woman. Only the most creative name for our most well-thought-out character, of course. However, we'll also be discussing Male the Man, just so we also have an alternative example of a love interest. We'll discuss female first, and then man. Sort of like picking the male or female avatar in a Fire Emblem game, and just like those avatars, it isn't about what Female the Woman or Male the Man say, but about how they become the object of obsession to characters who actually have dialogue and do things. Female the Woman has two potential backstories, princess or goth-coded vagrant. Both have their upsides, and so we'll do what none of you expected. Split Female the Woman into two different characters and make a love triangle between them and our protagonist. Bet you didn't see that one coming, did ya? So, with the innovation of the love triangle, we may continue with Royala the Woman and Emo the Woman. No relation, but they do both have the woman at the end because, at the end of the day, it's the closest thing to a personality trait of theirs that I know how to write, which is definitely indicative of reality and not my inability to write people who aren't just like me. Royala, of course, is the princess. Naturally, she's incredibly wealthy and rich and moneyed and prestigious and such, and also blonde. Emo, then, is a petty criminal, or perhaps an assassin or something if we want her to actually be important to the setting. We probably don't, but she has black hair. You see, there's this ancient conception of the either saints, i.e. kind and innocent with literally unrealistically no flaws, or sinners, harlots and liars and deceivers, and there was no room in between these two concepts. All women were considered to be one or the other. You see, there's a lot of history to it, and understanding that is important if you're a freaking nerd. What's actually important about it to us is basically that there are two types of female love interests. Blonde and pretty, and black-haired and hot. The blonde one is always nice, the dark-haired one is always mean. Many stories then directly translate the literal one of them has on average more light in their appearance into them being the better choice, which makes total sense, of course. But we at JBAD Incorporated aren't like most stories, and so we'll take this in a new direction. What makes us different is we are going to make both of these people completely intolerable. Probably not more intolerable than the protagonist we're going to be pairing them with in their love triangle, but it'll be pretty close. So, Royala, of course, is a princess. Of where? Doesn't matter, because that would imply we need to put effort into the noble house she comes from, or any of her political connections that might result from that. You know, all that unimportant, world-unaffecting stuff. But we don't need to worry about anybody questioning why she won't be using any of those connections to help our protagonist, because she's the kind of noble who just kind of assumes everyone has servants to give them food, and those servants have servants too, of course. She also barely knows how to spell or write or even count, because naturally, her naivete also means she has to be just kind of stupid. It's not like noble families ever taught their heirs how to do anything important, of course. You might be hearing all of this and thinking, man, if it's between this and a capable assassin, it seems like this love triangle's barely going to be a competition. Well, you don't know what Emo's personality is going to be like yet, do ya? Emo is going to be a capable assassin, yes, pretty smart and competent and strong and all that. But you know what makes every personality better? Incredible, highly concentrated arrogance. She cannot go more than 5 minutes without talking about herself and how she is simply better than everyone else around her. Our protagonist might do that as well, but it's definitely a likable trait, even a boon to his personality, when he does it. Why? Because he's literally me. or you. Look, it's okay when we brag, but not when anybody else does it. And that's the reason our protagonist will probably end up with Royala at the end of the story, which is at least probably a better reason than the more classic method of drawing a direct comparison between lightness of complexion and goodness, but it's still not great. It's amazing. But before we move on to male the man's two variants, I can now explain how we have demonstrated the two fundamental actors in a love triangle with your protagonist. There's the beauty and the brain, or more realistically, the idiot and the asshole. One is always pretty and or rich but stupid, the other is always capable and smart but unlikable or generally a bad person. This format never gets old, nor makes both options seem intolerable, or even just unrealistically diametrically opposed, as if they only exist to be opposites in the protagonist's mind. And implying these two characters exist only for our protagonist's sake? Well, it's true, but we don't want the audience to know that. It's all about selling the illusion that these are real people and not puppets the author can use on their self-insert protagonist to experience others being attracted to them for the first time. But following the logic we've just demonstrated with our love interest ladies, now we have our dateable dudes. Following our beauty and the brains formula, the first of them is Jock Headrock. Jock Headrock is not named for being a rock star or perhaps an Iron Maiden enthusiast, nor even for having a mean headbang. It's because one time, while mountain climbing greased up and shirtless, he got distracted by his endless flexing of his massive muscles onto the puny world below him and slipped. He then hit his head on a rock and hasn't been the same ever since. To be fair, Jock was never the brightest to begin with, and some have started to wonder if the brain damage might have actually jarred more things into place than it knocked out, but the end result is one of the dullest people to ever exist. Jock can count to 3, sometimes. He can also recite the alphabet if it's written out in front of him. But he can't recite anything else that's written in front of him because he also can't read. He spends every waking moment look-smaxing, which does include the parts where he hits his face with a hammer to try and further chisel out his jawline, which is completely unnecessary because for all his many, many faults, he basically already has as good of a jawline as you could hope for. Much aligned with his look-smaxing tendencies, this dude hates women, except for the protagonist that he orbits, of course. Jock is just kind of a violent guy who beats up people who say things he doesn't understand, which turns out to therefore be most people and most things. Much in the same vein as how people send love letters and offers of marriage to serial killers and bombers, we will portray his wanton destructiveness as something to be fixed, and ergo something our protagonist can fix in him, because what type of romance is more realistic than a perfect protagonist fixing a serial abuser with an IQ lower than the average outdoor temperature in Celsius in Oymyakon? And as for his social status, which might provide him at least some redeeming factors, well, he is rich, independently, because he's basically a medieval dropshipper selling miracle cures. So he has a lot of money, but hearing about where he got it from might induce nausea. And as for his love triangle counterpart, well, that can only be Nerdly Sniffwinkle. Nerdly is a very snivelly little guy who talks like this all the time. But he really is such a nice guy. He has this odd facial hair pattern where it seems like he can only get it to grow on his neck rather than his face, but he's beautiful on the inside, guys, trust me, even though he refuses to shave. Or bathe. Most of the time. Nerdly is very smart. His IQ is 200 and he's a genius inventor, so he's also rich. What he's the inventor of, however, is a variety of toxic gases used by alchemists to poison people, but that's okay and not something you'd ever really have to worry about. The chances of the protagonist or him dying in a failed experiment are almost none, of course. There is, though, another side to his intelligence as well, which is that he is smart by the measure of 200 IQ, but by every other factor with which one could measure intelligence, most crucially in the realms of emotional and social intelligence, he's not great. When the protagonist's dog dies, he's the kind of guy who would say, "Oh, dogs die. Get over it, sweetheart." But he's a total champion for women in all other fields. Trust me, guys. If a negative word is said of the protagonist, he'll be right there to say, "Stop right there. Let me protect you, princess." Then cut them down with his, say it with me, guys, katana. This is devolving further and further as time goes on. You know, honestly, I don't think I can subject our protagonist, even as hypothetical as she might be, to either of those two. So I think what we'll do regarding Nerdly and Jock is set them up with each other and then introduce a werewolf and a vampire to be our protagonist's love interests. Because that has never happened before. She'll probably end up with the vampire after the werewolf does this one too many times. And as for what follows, now that we have our actual love interests, well, it's time to discuss some of the nuances of working within these love triangles of ours so that we can be sure to have the most satisfying and totally not obvious conclusions ever. First, there's a couple required categories of things that have to happen. Since we've basically done away with Jock and Nerdy for the time being, we'll go back to focusing on Royala and Emo, but follow along. One of them has to be a childhood friend. I think we can pretty easily make that Emo in this case. Then, as the protagonist sets off on his journey, he'll meet the other one when he's still entering the exciting new world offered by his adventure. This will be where he meets Royala, who immediately takes an interest in him for essentially no reason. Especially because this protagonist is still basically just this image right now. I don't know, we'll give him the face of protagonist Von Generic for the time being, because he is, as far as I remember, currently terminally alone. So, Royala is immediately attracted to his purple mustache, and protagonist is given the impossible dilemma. Stay loyal to his mass-murdering assassin childhood friend, or a very stupid princess. And it's once we get ourselves into this state that we achieve the main benefit of writing love interests and love triangles into our fantasy story. And that is the ability to fill pages with angsting over this love triangle in the places where intelligent world building or character work could go. Why spend time understanding the grand scale of this conflict against the Dark Lord when it can be spent with protagonist wondering if he combed his mustache well enough for Royala? Why should protagonist wonder about his place in the world, destined to take part in a battle against evil he may never have wanted anything to do with, when he can think about whether Emo would be mad at him for talking to Royala? This angsting is perfect content for our story because it can fill paragraphs and paragraphs without anything actually happening. We can write dozens of scenes where he spends time with one or the other making vaguely romantic gestures without quite committing, so we can keep the audience in suspense about which of the two he prefers, or which of them likes him more. That last one especially, because we all know that the best partner for anyone is the person who can obsess over them the most effectively. It's the exact reason that when loading into a match of a game and you see one profile named something like Bert loves Susan and the other one is named Susan loves Bert, you immediately assume these are rational and stable people and good players rather than the type that are going to make you uninstall the game and throw your computer into an incinerator and then jump in after it. Got a little off topic there. Dead by Daylight does things to people. Why else would I make videos like this? But there are a few more golden rules here. The first is that a decision on who wins the love triangle, it is a competition, cannot be determined until either right before, during, or after the climax of the story. That's because half of your readers are just going to be there for the love triangle and have no idea what the plot is about otherwise. The other half is there for the plot, but has never touched grass or someone romantically interested in them. Alas, we have the two types of fantasy readers. The next golden rule is that we can never allow our protagonist to actually make decisions. I probably should have talked about this in the protagonist video, but love triangles are about the protagonist and not the other two people involved in them anyway, so this is about as good a place as we're gonna get. It's very important that whenever a decision comes up for the protagonist, the plot makes that decision for them. This is simply because if they make a decision based on logic or reason or intuition or their own personal opinions, man, then someone isn't going to like those. You always have to keep the most insane AO3 fanfic writer planting a car bomb in your Honda Civic in mind. That AO3 fanfic writer will be looking for you if your character makes a decision they don't like, and the car bomb will be planted. And then, of course, the fanfic about the character making the other decision will be written, and another AO3 fanfic writer will kill that person. It's a real horrible cycle of violence. But I use that example because you simply need to strike first, by killing one of the members of the love triangle before a decision is made. If one of them is dead, they can't be chosen, meaning the other one wins by default. At that point, we should just start having love triangle death games where the survivor takes all in every story, but this can work in a pinch. The trick is just in making sure that the audience doesn't pick up on the fact that you probably just used the plot to kill whichever of the two you liked less. Then there might be two casualties, the loser of the love triangle and yourself from the car bomb, and that's the worst possible outcome. So anyway, we'll be spicy and say it's Royala, actually, who slips on a banana peel and falls off the tallest tower of her castle, and so Emo wins the love triangle. The end. And don't forget to use that logic for other situations. Does your protagonist have the two people about to die save only one trope happening to them? Just have one of them inexplicably let go before he gets the opportunity to pick which of them he saves. It's not like this trope can be interesting when subverted or entirely upended after all. But all in all, I hope we have thoroughly shown you how to write one of the love interests and one of the love triangles of all time. Anyway, if this sounds like a place you want to be, we have a Discord if you want to hang out with my editor and I, and a Patreon if you're crazy enough to want it, where we post all our videos early. As we close out, I'd like to thank those patrons of ours: Sonny, Isaac Parrott, Raymond, Don, Sadako, Cavalier, Sazabi, Shieldmate, Fenya, and Michelle of the Knights of the Inner Circle. Vion and Jody on Void are Knights, and Greer, TOW, Craig, Victoria, Lauren, Noah, Saint Sir Nicholas, Joush, Kelly, Citron, and Realize are loyal squires. And remember, the truth about love interests is that they are actually a pretty valuable part of fiction. Romance is a big part of life and a desire for many people, and so it is natural that we tell of it in stories. But the honest key to writing it is just to write the love interest as another person first that, through the natural evolution of both characters, grows close to the protagonist and vice versa. The best love interests are often those you don't identify as such right away.